Treasurer.
Fantastic. As you all know, the Association of Salaried Medical Specialists Union decided to strike today. This is a disappointing development that has unfortunately led to the disruption of patients' healthcare throughout the country. Health New Zealand has advised me that an estimated 4,300 procedures such as hip operations, knee operations, cataract removals and critical specialist assessments would be delayed as a result of this strike. Like all New Zealanders, I'm extremely grateful for the care and service that our health workers provide Kiwis, particularly in their time of need. That's why I want to see this dispute resolved, and the only way to do that is by getting back around the negotiating table. Health New Zealand is committed to reaching a settlement with ASMS and has applied to the Employment Relations Authority for facilitation as the next step to resolve this. I urge the ASMS union to return to the negotiation table so a deal can be struck and patients can get the care that they need. Finally, I want to thank all of the senior doctors who did turn up to work today, those who provided life-preserving services to patients, and also those who voluntarily continued to turn up to work despite the strike. I also want to thank the junior doctors and nurses at our hospitals who kept our hospitals flowing and are continuing to do that right now whilst the strike continued. Health New Zealand has been continuing to keep me briefed as the day has gone on and I've been advised that life-preserving services have continued to be provided to Kiwis who have needed that as they turned up to hospital. And with that, happy to answer any questions.
Minister, you say you're disappointed. Some of the doctors we spoke to this morning say this is the worst they've seen the health sector ever. So your response to that?
Look, this government is committed to investing in our health system. Last year's budget we committed $16.6 billion over 3 budgets into our health system, a record investment. We have more doctors working at Health New Zealand than ever before. We've got more nurses working at Health New Zealand than ever before. We're continuing to invest in our frontline services because we know how critically important they are to New Zealanders. Yes, there are challenges, and the offer that was put on the table was designed to help address that. For example, making sure that we could bond doctors into hard-to-staff regions was a critical part to try and attract and retain staff into those communities such as Nelson and Gisborne and other parts of New Zealand. Removing the bottom 3 pay bands for senior medical officers meant that a junior medical officer becoming a senior medical officer wouldn't get an effective pay cut. In fact, a first-year specialist would have got a 9.5% pay increase, around $17,000 pay increase this year under the offer. This was a deal, Health New Zealand put a credible offer on the table. Unfortunately, the union decided not to put that to its members. They should have. Instead, they decided to continue with the strike, which is causing disruption of care to patients.
Minister, the response to that, though, was that the offer was that there was no point in putting it in front of the members because the offer wasn't actually any better than the original.
Well, the majority of the union's members either did not vote or voted no to striking. Only a minority voted to strike. The right thing to have done would have been to put it to its members. Regardless, as I've said in my comments now, Health New Zealand has applied to the Employment Relations Authority for urgent facilitation as the next step to resolve these issues. I encourage the union and I urge the union to get back around the negotiating table to resolve this dispute so that patients can get the care that they need.
As you mentioned, thousands of procedures postponed today. Is your opinion that the doctors striking today don't care about their patients?
No, they absolutely care about their patients. They care deeply about their patients. My comments have been clearly aimed at the union, which decided to continue with the strike rather than put the offer back to its members. Regardless, the next step is Health New Zealand has applied for urgent facilitation. I encourage the union to get back around the negotiating table to resolve this dispute so that patient care can continue. And look, there are too many New Zealanders who are waiting too long. This government inherited wait lists which had ballooned beyond measure under the last government. We have an enormous task to get on top of those wait lists. The strike action does not help address that, and we need to resolve it, and that's what Health New Zealand is committed to doing.
You mentioned the bond system that's been put in place for some of those hard to...
Well, that was part of the offer on the table.
Hard to staff. I mean, would you like... Is that something that we can be rolling out in other regions as well?
Well, that is part of what's part of the negotiation. That's why I say this was a credible offer to help address some of the challenges that we know we're facing as a country. Yes, we're finding it hard to staff in some regions, and that offer was designed to address that. A credible offer, which should have been put to the members rather than continuing with strike action, which has led to disruption of really important services for thousands of New Zealanders. People waiting for a hip operation, that's the most important thing happening to that individual this year. Someone waiting for a knee operation, that's the most important thing happening to that individual this year. People plan their lives around these appointments. That has been disrupted, and it didn't have to be. So I call on the union to get back around the negotiating table so we can resolve these issues.
So you've highlighted the disruption that the action today has caused, but isn't the very point of an industrial strike to cause disruption so that it highlights the issues at the forefront?
These are some of our most critical health services which matter to New Zealanders, paid for by taxpayers, who are the people who are needing these services. These are people who are needing their hips, knees, cataracts done. They've been waiting too long. And that disruption to those individuals is significant. I'm highlighting that because there was an alternative pathway, and the alternative pathway was to put the offer to the members, and the union decided not to do that. As I said, Health New Zealand has now applied for facilitation, and I encourage both parties to get back around the table and resolve the dispute.
Some patients are actually in support of the strike, though, and to Julia's question, in terms of a significant action, this is about a kind of long-term fix. You've got the issue of much higher salaries in Australia, for example. Why would anybody stay in New Zealand or take a job here when they could get paid much more over there?
Look, what we're committed to doing is getting back around the table to negotiate. That's what needs to happen. That's why Health New Zealand has applied for urgent facilitation, because that is where these issues should be resolved, not by disrupting the care of thousands of patients. And Health New Zealand put a credible offer on the table. The government is committed to investing. We've put, as I said, a record investment in last year's budget, over 3 budgets, $16.68 billion uplift towards Health New Zealand over 3 budgets. There are more doctors and more nurses working at Health New Zealand than there were when we, 15, 18 months ago. We're committed to investing in frontline services, and the best place for these issues to be resolved is around the negotiating table.
Do you accept, though, that a significant offer needs to be put on the table now?
Well, what I would say is these issues are best dealt with around the negotiating table, not by continuing to disrupt the care of patients. And I acknowledge the critical role that our senior doctors, our junior doctors, our healthcare professionals play. They are, the offer which was put on the table was a credible offer. It would have meant a first-year junior doctor would have had a 9.5% pay increase. It was a 2-year deal. As I said, it was a credible offer which should have been put to their members rather than continuing with strike action.
The main new part of the offer, though, only applied to a handful of doctors.
Well, the reality, these were the issues that were raised by the union in the negotiations. Health New Zealand put an offer on the table to address the key issues which were raised. And the union decided to continue with strike action, which, as I said, was only supported by a minority of their members, rather than put it back out to their members. That's what they should have done. And so now Health New Zealand has applied for urgent facilitation to resolve this issue, and I urge both parties to get back around the table.
Where do you think the general public sit on this issue?
I think the general public don't want to see this disruption to services. They want to see patients being able to be seen in a timely and quality manner. And as I said, New Zealanders, as am I, are incredibly grateful for the work that all of our healthcare professionals deliver. They know how important it is, and it's really important that these issues are resolved around negotiating tables rather than the care of thousands of New Zealanders being cancelled and delayed.
What have you been hearing in terms of focus groups or polling on this issue?
What I've been hearing is that New Zealanders want to see the service is delivered and continue to be delivered so we can get on top of the wait lists which we inherited as a government. There are too many New Zealanders already waiting too long, and what happened today is not going to assist with the challenges of getting on top of those wait lists. The wait lists are too long, and this is only going to make them worse, and we need these issues to be resolved around the negotiating table rather than patients having their care delayed.
Has the National Party done polling or focus grouping on this issue?
Well, what we campaigned on was putting back in place targets. We have put those targets back in place. We have inherited wait lists which are far too long for patients, and what we are focused on is reducing the wait times for patients, and that is why we, in last year's budget, invested a record $16.68 billion over 3 budgets to increase investment in our health system and to enable the health system to deliver more. And I'm incredibly grateful for all of the work that our healthcare professionals do. But as I said, these are issues that should be resolved around the negotiating table. That's why Health New Zealand has applied for facilitation in order to have those issues resolved, and I encourage the union to get back around the negotiating table so these issues can be resolved. Just
quickly though, have you specifically asked about the doctor strike issue?
What we are focused on is delivering on what we campaigned on. What we campaigned on was putting back in place targets and delivering shorter wait times for patients. That's why we put in place targets. That's why we've invested record investment in our health system, and that's why that's why Health New Zealand and the union should get back around the negotiating table rather than having strike action.
2 more questions. When is that going to change? When are we going to be able to sit back and look and see real change in terms of wait lists, and when are patients going to be able to experience that? Like, when is that going to happen, that change?
Well, all I'd say, what we inherited was the number of patients waiting more than 4 months for elective treatment had increased by 2,500% under the last government. So those wait lists had ballooned significantly. What we are starting to see is more surgeries and more treatments and more appointments happening than people being added to those lists. So we're starting to see that those trends will take time to develop. But what I can say, strike action like what we've seen today by the union, which cancels the care of thousands of patients, does not help to reduce those wait times. It will worsen the situation, and so that's why these are people waiting for their hip operation, their knee operation, cataract removals, or their critical first special assessment. Having that delay does not help that problem. Last question.
Minister, the union has invited you to come to their annual conference. Will you accept that invitation?
I believe it's the office has received that, and obviously we'll consider that invitation. But our message to the union is get back around the negotiating table. That is the place these issues should be resolved, rather than what we've seen today.
Would you like to go there?
We consider all invitations that I receive, and I've met with the ASMS. I have met with the ASMS union, and obviously meet with members as I visit hospitals. But my message today is Health New Zealand has applied to the Employment Relations Authority for urgent facilitation. That is the next step of this process to resolve these issues, and I encourage both parties to get around the table to resolve these issues. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Minister.